morning, General Breedlove. Thank you for being with us and welcome to the Center for the Study of Democracy's Global Defense Dialogue. Before we begin, I'd like to thank and welcome the team at the Center for the Study of Democracy in Sofia and anyone and everyone dialing in from elsewhere. The Center for the Study of Democracy is a leading European policy institute based in Sofia, dedicated to building bridges between thought leaders in the scholarly, policymaking, and practitioner communities. Ladies and gentlemen, General Philip Breedlove is a retired four-star general in the United States Air Force. He served as the Supreme Allied Commander for Europe, SACEUR, for NATO and Commander of U.S. European Command from 2013 to 2016 after serving as the Commander of the U.S. Air Forces in Europe. He's also a former Vice Chief of Staff of the United States Air Force and has held many other distinguished positions in the U.S. Defense Forces. Currently, he serves on several boards of directors, is actively engaged in the international security policy community, and is an astute observer and frequent commentator on global security affairs. Our format today is for a conversation with General Breedlove for about 40 minutes, followed by 20 minutes of discussion with you. So if you'll please start thinking and articulating any questions or comments, and place them in the chat section of this platform. We will get to those questions and comments at about 0940 Washington time. With that, let's begin. General Breedlove, if I can begin by asking you, what are your main takeaways from the recent NATO summit and from President Trump's recent meeting with NATO Secretary General Rutte?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me and good to see you again. And I look forward to our conversation. So the good news is that NATO's leadership and the nations of NATO, remembering that the real power of NATO is not the Secretary General or the SACEUR, it is the NAC. The members of the NAC, the Secretary General, and others recognized that we needed a positive event. We needed to get through an event that left NATO in a better place than maybe when it started. And so this summit was dedicated to having a good interaction with the American president. And I think it was a complete success in that respect. The way the summit was set up, the way the subjects were handled, and the fact that they rapidly got to the main subject that the U.S. president wanted to talk about, I think was a tribute to the leadership of the Secretary General and the support of the larger group called the NAC, the North Atlantic Council. And we did have a positive result. There were nations that were on the fence on many of the issues up until, the last days and even the last night. And those nations made decisions to support this positive way ahead. And some of them made some sacrifices that will, give them some issues back in their countries with their populace. But the bottom line is, we came to a good result. The main issues of defense investment by the nations were met, and we left on a very high note. SACEURs are often asked about Article 5, which is the most famous defensive one equals defense by all kind of thing. If one is attacked, we're all in to protect. And that seems to be the focus of everybody that really doesn't understand NATO very well, because if you ask a SACEUR what they're most concerned about, a SACEUR, a Supreme Allied Commander Europe, will tell you Article 3, which becomes before Article 5. And Article 3 is about investing in your own defense. I will badly paraphrase it, but what it says is you should invest in your own defense and create ability to defend your nation, and then create excess capabilities and capacities that would allow you to aid in the defense of the alliance should it need you. So this is the point where nations have to do some introspection and decide, am I investing enough in my own defense and then the ability to contribute to NATO? So that's what SACEURs are worried about. And frankly, while it's not well articulated by any American administration and not this one, it's not about paying NATO. It's about investing in yourself. And that's the key that came out of this. As to the meetings following that, I think Ruta is very good. He understands how to handle his toughest customers. And it's more than just the American administration. There are others that he has to deal with. And Secretary Ruta has already shown a very good and strong ability to lead NATO to the places it needs to go in order to be better prepared for the new future. And I think that the outcome of their conversations, again, were very positive and leave us in a much better situation as we now are beginning to understand that Mr. Putin is not a partner in peace.
Thank you, General. What do you make of the Pentagon's announcement last week of a pause in weapons shipments to Ukraine, followed by an almost immediate policy reversal?
Well, this administration is 6 months old, and there are a lot of people in this administration who do not have a depth of experience in their current jobs. And this is not a criticism. This is just normal. Unless a new president brings on a bunch of old people who have served, in politics as politicians serving other politicians, unless they bring those on board, they're going to have to bring on some young and more fresh talent. And I think that's kind of what's happened in this administration. And I think what you saw in that announcement was a disconnect in the continuity of sort of policy thinking. And we had a young functionary in the business make some decisions that didn't align well with his bosses, and it's worked itself out. This is how people learn, by making mistakes once, but not a second time. And I think that the administration has handled it and moved on.
Do you think, sir, that disconnects like that give cause for the Europeans to question the U.S. commitment to Article 5 and to supporting NATO?
Okay, so my short answer is no. I want to answer a different part of that question first. Um, what some of these young people don't understand is the impact of these kind of declarations on the fighting man in the field. The individuals that were involved in this decision have never commanded anything or led anything. And they don't understand what it's like to a young soldier out in the field who's fighting for his life, and he's fighting for his country in an existential fight where a global aggressor has illegally, immorally, and inhumanely invaded his country. And he or she, in some cases, are out there fighting with their very life to stop that illegal, immoral, inhumane attack. And then to be in the field and fighting hard and understand that your number one supporter is pulling the rug out from under your feet. There are people in our administration who have no idea what that means because, again, they've never commanded units in combat, nor have they commanded at all, really, at that level. And so I think the thing that gives me the most pause is that we have young functionaries in our government that don't really get it. They don't understand it, and we need to be careful about how they do their business. And I think that the rapid change by the president, who said that's not my policy and got everything back on track, that's very helpful. But remember that the damage was done in the field to the soldiers who are fighting for their lives and for the life of their countries. And that sort of makes those folks who are forward fighting have pause about the reliability of the United States as a partner in peace or a partner for peace.
Let's talk for a minute about that existential conflict. So we have, I don't know how many now, North Korean troops that are supporting the Russian aggression in Ukraine. We have Russia using both North Korean and Iranian weapon systems. And of course, China has been economically supporting Russia throughout this aggression, and recently has said I think the Chinese foreign minister said that China can't accept Russia's defeat in Ukraine. Does this combination of factors suggest that we need a significant change in policy, both in the United States and in Europe?
Well, first of all, may I just adjust what you said about China because I see them having a broader role than you ascribe. We are seeing that some of the most important improvements to the Shahed and other weapon systems that Russia is using are being enabled by China. We see chips that are Chinese, and we are seeing American chips that have come through China that are in these weapon systems that Russia is using to attack Ukraine. So I very much see the rest of it the way you did. There is now a coalition fighting against Ukraine. North Korea has supplied men once. Now we understand they're supplying manpower to the industrial capacity of Russia because Russia is struggling to fill their industries. And now we see that North Koreans are going to be helping Russia build attack weapon systems. And we see China and Iran directly supporting Russia in their weapons abilities and technology and tactics, techniques, and procedures. So the world likes to say this is in fact, the world, some of them like to say this is a Ukrainian-Russian war. I take great umbrage with that. This is a Russian war on Ukraine. I call it the Russian war of aggression. This war is all about Russia. It's all to benefit Mr. Putin and Mr. Putin's worldview. It has nothing to do with anything Ukraine did. This is Russia, Russia, Russia. And now Russia leads a coalition that's attacking into Ukraine.
Russia, 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 and yet, as you say, it also involves North Korea, China, and Iran. Um, Jamie Dimon, the CEO of JP Morgan, said not so long ago that we are already in World War III. Would you agree with that assessment, that we are already at war?
Well, I would tell you that this war is 11 years old. There's a lot of people out there whose selective memory of history is not very good. This war started when I was the SACIR in that winter of 13 and 14 when Russia first went into Crimea, and then weeks later when Russia went into the Donbass. Twice, Russia amassed its army, marched across international recognized borders, and invaded a neighbor with the intent of subjugating them. And we have been at war there since that time. People like to forget that there was that period of a couple of years where Russia was invading Donbass and fortifying and occupying Crimea. And they forget that for those years, right up until 3.5 years ago, when this last phase of that war began, that Russians were killing Ukrainians and Ukrainians were killing Russians on the line of contact in east of the Dnieper River in the Donbass. And so this war has not stopped for 11 years. This war has gone on. It started in Obama's time. It carried on in Trump's time. It went into Biden's time, and now it's back on Trump time. This war has been on for 11 years, and we need to remember that because we have to address this problem. It's not a recent problem.
I agree, sir. To to put my question into General Petraeus's terms, how does this end? It's been going on now for 11 years. What is the best case scenario that you can foresee for Western interests?
Okay, so I'd hate to sound like I'm giving a history lesson, but we have to remember that there's some really smart guys who have written axioms about war that still apply today. And Clausewitz, of course, is famous for saying war is politics by other means. And I think that's important because it points to the fact that all wars are going to end in some sort of a political arrangement. Even wars where, say, for instance, the West, like World War II and possibly World War I, physically really won the war and destroyed or subjugated the enemy's ability to fight. Um, Even then, we had agreements that were signed that were largely political documents. So we will have some sort of political ending to this war. But it's all about setting the circumstances that drive those who are in the war to the peace table and to making an agreement. Now to your question. Um, this war will not end until Mr. Putin determines that he's not going to win it. Okay. He's going to keep moving forward. I am not a historian, even though I kind of try to act like it once in a while, but I believe we attribute to Lenin the following sort of Russian saying, and that is when you approach your enemy, fix your bayonet and press your bayonet into his belly. And if it is soft, press harder and deeper. If it is hard, pull back and reconsider. Well, in the West, we have been soft to Mr. Putin. And he's going to keep doing exactly what his philosophy tells him to do. He's going to keep pushing harder and deeper because we are soft. We are treating him with kid gloves. We're trying to make him a partner when he's not a partner, he's an enemy. And so we have got to come to the resolve to show Mr. Putin that he's pushing against a hard entity, and then maybe he will quit. So I've heard another phrase, which is not mine, but I use it a lot. And that is Mr. Putin will not stop. Mr. Putin will have to be stopped. The West has got to figure out how they're going to make Mr. Putin stop.
If you were advising the President of the United States, what would you advise him to do? What measures would you advise him to take with regard to Ukraine?
Okay, the most important and first thing that the West and the US president needs to do, in my opinion, is publicly, demonstratively, loudly, and proudly tell Mr. Putin to stop. We are now asking and begging and hat in hand and trying to do things through smoky deals in the back. And Mr. Putin sees all of that as weakness. Every bit of that is weakness to him. He's going to have to be told to stop. Then the next question that everybody asks is, well, what if he doesn't stop? Then we have to stop him. And Ukraine is not asking for us to send soldiers and things to stop Mr. Putin. They're doing a pretty good job of stopping him now without almost any help. Okay, but what help would we have to give to have Ukraine stop Mr. Putin? I go back. People say, "Well, Mr. Putin's winning this war." I do not think Mr. Putin's winning this war. After 11 years, he's taken about 19% of the country of Ukraine. Very reputable reporters have said that in the last year, now this is about a month old data now, but in the last 12 months, he's taken less than two-thirds of 1% of Ukrainian land. And he's done that at the cost of thousands and thousands and thousands of Russian soldiers. So I look at the incredible cost to Russia. I look that Russia can't man its own industry. It's having to have North Korea help it. I look at Russia, who had to have North Korean troops come in and try to help Russia retake sovereign land in the Kursk region, which they still haven't totally taken back. But Russia needed help from North Korea to retake sovereign Russian land. Do all of those sound like a country that's winning the war? The West, I think, needs to understand that Mr. Putin is not winning this war. And the West needs to now raise the cost on Mr. Putin to make it even apparent to him that he's not winning the war. Because until he sees he's not winning or can't win, he's going to keep pushing the bayonet into the soft belly.
Clearly, economic sanctions aren't sufficient to deter Mr. Putin. Uh, I, I don't know if you agree with that, but it seems to me they haven't been sufficient. Uh, what more could we be doing other than rhetorically demanding that Putin stop and applying ever more stringent economic sanctions?
Well, there's a lot of policy that we could talk about. I want to write myself a note because I'll not remember to come back to this. But the on sanctions, I am a fan of sanctions, not because I think they're going to work. In fact, I'm pretty famous for saying that, and I believe it still is factually true. Sanctions have never changed Mr. Putin's actions on a battlefield. Never. They haven't done it. Mr. Putin keeps saying Russia is used to suffering and will get through this. But may I say that sanctions are really affecting the Russian economy. They're already really affecting the Russian people. They are affecting Russia writ large in a pretty tough way. And I say keep piling it on because that might help us get a different set of decision makers in Russia. But again, we got to remember that sanctions have never changed Mr. Putin's actions on the battlefield. So we cannot rely on sanctions to do that, but they can set the stage for different decisions by different people. And I think it's important that we keep crippling his economy. And oh, by the way, he's a master at getting around our sanctions. You know, we put sanctions on oil. He has a shadow fleet now, over 140 ships, that is moving oil everywhere. And when he doesn't even deny that those shadow ships are his, he started escorting some of them when one got pulled over by one of the Northern Sea nations. Now we got Russian ships, in some cases, escorting the shadow ships, which they deny as being Russian, et cetera, et cetera. And so we need to cripple, we need to end, we need to attack in every way we can his oil industry, because that's about, depending on who you listen to, 35 to 40% of the Russian economy is petrochemical and relies on those shipments. We need to turn them off. We can if we want to. It boils down to this, which is the larger answer to what you asked, and that is we need policy. We need policy. Our policy right now is to tolerate what Russia's doing because we're hoping to cut a deal with Russia, and we don't want to set conditions that would preclude cutting a deal with Russia. I think it's very apparent, and I think that maybe our president is beginning to understand this now, that Mr. Putin never has, never will be a partner in establishing peace. Mr. Putin has said it over and over. Lavrov recently said, you know, that all of Ukraine is Russia. Every time over the last 5 or 6 months that we have approached Russia, either through our president on the phone, our secretaries of state, or our emissaries, every time they go to Russia, we get rebuffed. Get out of here. We got nothing for you. Okay. And then not only do we get rebuffed, within a day or two or three, massive attack into Ukraine as a punctuation point. We're in charge here, not you guys. We will decide when and how we're going to attack Ukraine, not you guys. We are dictating the terms of this war. And until we create policy that changes that approach by Russia, we're not going to make inroads into this peace.
Well, on the diplomatic front, you would argue in favor of unequivocal uh, uh, rhetorical rigidity, rejecting Putin's effort in Ukraine. Economically, you would argue for trying to cripple the Russian economy. What about militarily? What can we do militarily to support Ukraine? Are we providing the right weapons with the right restrictions? What could we change there?
Once again, the most important thing to change up front is policy. We recently had a little bit of another disconnect in what our nation said. There was this indication that we had asked Ukraine, can you strike Moscow? Can you increase the cost on Moscow? And then when that sort of became public, there was an immediate sort of retraction saying we don't want Ukraine striking Moscow. Um, it just really baffles me. Russia, across the last 3.5 years, and certainly even more demonstratively in the last month and a half, has struck into Kyiv and the major population centers of Ukraine with hundreds and hundreds, and in aggregate, thousands of missiles into these big public areas and the capital. And yet we want Ukraine not to fire back at the Russian capital. This to me is completely disconnected from reality. We are creating sanctuary for Russia. It's okay for you to attack Ukraine. We're going to take it easy on you because we're trying to cut a deal. But we're not going to allow Ukraine to strike back at Russia. This is about as confusing an approach as we can take in policy realms. So the first thing to do is much less about shiny missiles or whatever. It's about getting our policy right. Take the shackles off of Ukraine. Let Ukraine do to Russia what Russia has been doing for 11 years to Ukraine. And if we did that, we might be surprised at how good it is. Now, we have seen Ukraine using Ukrainian built capabilities to do some pretty exquisite work in Russia. And may I just point out, we've seen Ukraine do what we call counter force targeting. Ukraine is targeting military capabilities. We see Russia in a vast preponderance taking what we call counter value targeting. They are targeting civilians, civilian infrastructure, and all the things that support civilians in Ukraine. So we're tolerating a fight against the people and the population of Ukraine, and we're not enabling a country that's trying to fight a counter force, counter military capability. It's just really hard for me to understand that policy.
That is a strange policy indeed. It seems very calculated not to succeed or not to win, which raises a question. Do you think that we in the United States and the West generally are oversensitive to the fear of escalation?
Yes.
How can we manage that fear? How do we balance between an aggressive posture and the potential for escalation?
So there are those that who just basically see this as there is no win for America, so why would we stick our neck out in this? And that's what Russia is counting on. They're their ability to control our thoughts and our reasoning, reflexive control. I don't want to use big terms on this show because many may not be familiar with it, but this is what Russia practices. And I I didn't make any friends in a recent meeting when they said we not this is not something we can do. And I said, well, I am glad that this is not the attitude that John F. Kennedy had when he was faced with the Cuban Missile Crisis. I'm glad that this is not the attitude that Ronnie Reagan had during the intermediate range missile crisis. Um, we have in the past stood up to this reflexive control and this fear of escalation, and we have gotten through those times just fine. I think that sadly it's a bit of I'll get myself in trouble again. I think it's a little bit of a lazy approach. I believe there are things that we can be doing that would not result in the nuclear the nuclear end that so many fear. I think there's a lot we can do short of that, and we are not trying to step forward in that, sadly.
Yes, isn't it interesting that back in the days of John Kennedy, the theorist Herman Kahn identified something like 53 steps on the escalation ladder between conflict and nuclear holocaust, and
And
we certainly haven't explored those.
that's correct. And I mean, this reflexive control of the Russians is really quite demonstrative. It slowed down a little bit, but in essence, you've got somebody at the very top of Russian leadership chain, Lavrov and up, or occasionally just below Lavrov and up, that about once a week to 10 days, somebody over there of that ilk says something about nukes. The most famous recent, of course, is the one that Putin himself said that, well, I hope we can get through this war without having to use nukes.
Hmm.
They are keeping nukes on the mind of US and Western decision makers because they know it deters us. And
Mhm.
we need to figure out how to work out from under that deterrence to find one of those escalation ladders that we might start to move up.
Thank you, sir. Ladies and gentlemen in the audience, please, I encourage you I see a few questions in the chat. Do put your questions in there and we'll get to you very shortly. General, just sort of going back and maybe ending the conversation about Ukraine, could you just describe for people who are skeptical about our interest in Ukraine, both in the United States and in Europe, what is the cost of losing in Ukraine? Or to put it conversely, what is the cost of a Russian victory in subjugating Ukraine?
So I often refer people back. It's kind of been conveniently overlooked at this point. Um, one of the things that Mr. Putin actually does is what he writes and talks about. That's what he does. Okay, he kind of works that way. And if you remember at the beginning of this last phase of the 11-year-long war, at the beginning of this last phase, before the large in scale in reinvasion, um, Mr. Putin handed us two documents. He wanted them to be called treaties. And he essentially, and I'm using bad English words to translate what he said, but he essentially said, sign these or else. I think the way it actually translated was sign these or there will be other means. We now know what those other means were. It was an invasion of Ukraine. If you go back and read those two documents, Mr. Putin tells us what his intention is. It's not like he's hiding it. Just go read them. Google them. You can get them. All of these things are probably bad translations of the Russian language. But the fact of the matter, Mr. Putin lays out a vision which looks an awful lot like the Warsaw Pact. And he demands that all of these things, like removing American troops, taking out NATO weapons, all these things in the surrounding nations would allow him then to invade them just like he has invaded Georgia in a war below the lines. He's invaded Moldova in a combined above the lines and below the lines war. And he's invaded Ukraine in an all out kinetic war. I mean, Mr. Putin is pretty transparent. Read the two documents and you'll see what his vision for Eastern Europe is. And I think that's where he'll go. I mean, we have no reason. He's pretty true to his words. We can expect it.
Can I just one question about Europe? What are the implications? This whole, at least since the recent invasion, Europe has more or less awoken to the Russian threat, and there's been a lot of ferment in Europe, as you know very well, including significant budgetary commitments to investment in European defense. What do you think of the concept of European strategic autonomy? Is this viable? Is it real? And at current defense spend rates, how long do you think it will be before Europe would be able to defend itself?
So let's you and I agree on how long we have been taking the peace dividend before we came to the realization that Russia was not a partner. An easy number to agree on would be 3 decades, right? Maybe
Mhm.
3 decades. How long do you think it's going to take of increased investment to erase 3 decades of drastically reduced investment? Maybe
Wow.
it'll take as much as 3 decades, won't it? I mean, you know, yes, we could accelerate that date a little bit. Great nations like Germany and others who have resources far beyond the rest of some of the rest of the European nations could very much accelerate what they do. But this is not going to happen overnight. It's gonna take a time. And may I tell you, this is the United States too. Our military today is the smallest and the oldest it's ever been. When I say oldest, the average age of our aircraft carriers, tanks, and fighter jets are the oldest they have ever been. And the recapitalization rates are not going to reverse the train. They're going to get older and older yet because we're not recapitalizing at a rate that turns that around. So this is not just the European nations, it's also the United States of America. We are the oldest and the smallest military we have ever been. So the point being that uh, I have never been, as a SACUR, afraid of what you call European autonomy. People always used to say, are you worried about this European army? No, I'm not, because almost everybody that's in the EU European army that's of any consequence is also in NATO. And any improvement they make to their military in the name of what, I don't care, is an increase to NATO. So I've never been threatened by a European army. I embrace it. If you look at Bosnia Herzegovina right now, you've got a European Union force down there, but because the European Union doesn't have the tools that NATO does, that force is led by the NATO deputy SACUR and enabled by NATO command and control and enabled by NATO intelligence. So we've got this great fusion down in Bosnia Herzegovina of a EU force with NATO capabilities that's doing a great job at a mission. I see that as the future. I don't see competition between these two forces. I see great cooperation between these forces as being the answer. I've always said, though, what other SACURs have said. If building a European army means that we've got to build a bunch more headquarters with a bunch more flags, and I can say this because I'm one of them, fat 4 stars, sitting in magnificent headquarters, that's wrong. We don't need to duplicate things that NATO already has. Again, look at Bosnia Herzegovina. Look at the operation off the coast of Africa, where the combination of European Union ability to go to a shore in a legal way combined with the NATO muscle of military command and control and ships on the sea, they had a huge part in shutting down the pirates. Um, so I'm not threatened by any of that. I think it's to be encouraged. I think the more that Europe can do for itself, the better. And I also believe that has to be accompanied with a NATO which still has the United States involved in a major substantive role.
Do you think that there is any reason for concern that the United States will uh, withdraw from NATO or reduce its commitment to NATO? You think that that's smoke?
I I there are so many people on both sides of the aisle that understand the value of NATO. I do not fear the United States pulling out of NATO. I'm not trying to make any statement, a political statement, especially about this administration. But presidents come and go. America is before any president. America is during the president, and America is after the president. Presidents of all ilk have to understand that America is way bigger than any one spot in time. Um, Parts of this equation are temporary, and parts of this equation are permanent. And I think that NATO in America are something that's going to last. I've written and I've talked and I've always say that NATO is going to be more important to the next 75 years than it was to the last 75 years.
Well, General, I appreciate your optimism. I certainly hope you're right. I'm going to go to a question from Martin Vladimirov, who thanks you for your insight and passionate remarks and asks what kind of policy and technological innovations in the way NATO aids Ukraine would be necessary for the Ukrainian army to reverse the Russian offensive and to go on the offensive itself.
Well, Martin, first of all, it's a great question. And I would have asked it in both directions. And let me answer the fun part first. What Ukraine has done in electronic warfare, what Ukraine has done in drone warfare, and what Ukraine has done in innovative attack tactics. What they did to strike those bombers on the other side of Russia is incredible and demonstrative. So we have a lot. I'm going to say it one more time. We have a lot to learn from Ukraine in this war. What we need to do for Ukraine is to help them where they can't be helped right now. Russia has been attacking them for 11 years, and their industries are hurt in many places. And what they need is the industrial capacities of the West to help them understand how to win this war. And now I'm going to sound pejorative. I am an airman. I've commanded joint formations multiple times in my life, but in the blood, I am an airman. And what we see in Ukraine is a war where air power has failed. Russia, even though it's supposed to be a world superpower in the air, has failed to even establish air superiority over its own troops, much less over Ukraine. The vaunted Russian Air Force has failed. Ukraine's Air Force, small, old, and understaffed and provided, was brave and fought valiantly, but they have not been able to establish air superiority over their own troops. And what if we were to enable Ukraine to have air superiority on the battlefield, we would not be in this World War I trench warfare featuring attritional war based on artillery exchange, etc. We would be in a very, very, very different place.
Thank you for that insight, sir. This question comes from Marian Sabev, who also thanks you for joining us and for your comments. You mentioned that Putin is not winning the conventional war, and that the war has exposed a lot of inefficiencies, corruption, and overall weakness in the Russian army. Do you think that Russia is now reorganizing its military and learning from its mistakes? And more broadly, do you think that NATO Europe should take the threat of Russian conventional warfare more seriously now?
Well, again, it's a great question with great insight. Of course, Russia is learning from their mistakes. Whether they will capitalize on what they have learned is the question. They show no propensity right now to try to stop, reset, and fight what we in the West would call a war of maneuver warfare, which would require air superiority and other things. Russia seems to believe that right now they can break the will of the West as long as they can just keep killing Ukrainians on the line. And Russia still absolutely doesn't show a lot of respect for their own losses. Their own losses are staggering. There are bigger and more expansive numbers, but the good the good numbers by the two or three organizations that I trust out there are that Russia's lost over 1 million people. Okay. And I'll tell you that in our country, in the United States of America, in Vietnam, we lost 58,000. Some people have the number a little higher, but we lost 58,000 troops in 10 years, and my country has not gotten over it yet. Russia has lost 1 million troops. And in the number in just the last 3.5 years is staggering. And at some point, as my father used to say, the chickens are going to come home to roost. Part of an indication that it's a problem now is look at what Russia's doing. The Finns will tell you that they're building two massive hospitals up near the Finnish border. Why are they doing that? They don't want their wounded in their big cities showing to their people what has happened in this war. So in order to get aid and capabilities, the Russians are going to move all these people out of their urban centers way out into the countryside so that their own people don't see what's happened. The crematories that have gone forward, those poor Russian soldiers who are and have been cremated, their family's never going to be told they're died. They're going to just tell them they've lost or they left, they went somewhere else or whatever, because Russia cannot stand the impact of what this war is beginning to have on its society.
That's very, very disconcerting. Uh, Ruslan Stefanov from the Center for the Study of Democracy thanks you for your insights and asks if you think we're now closer to giving Ukraine what it takes than we were a year ago, and who do you think should lead on this in terms of which country should take the lead in supporting Ukraine?
Again, a poignant question, and I will answer again kind of how I've already answered. Uh, when we say what we need to give Ukraine, everybody focuses on stuff. Is it Patriots? Is it F-16s? Is it this? Is it that? The most important thing we need to give Ukraine now is a change in Western policy. We need to make it apparent, clear, public, demonstrative, and declaratory. We need to make it clear to Mr. Putin, you're not going to win this war. We need to give him pause for does he keep throwing away Russian soldiers' lives in an effort that we in the West tell him he will not win. If if we first and foremost change our policy, then we need to really discuss what are those important capabilities that we need to give Ukraine. And may I now, once again, to a certain degree, give you an airman's view of this war. We are spending a lot of money to help Ukraine shoot down incoming missiles. In the analogy of an archer and an arrow, we are paying mega bucks to shoot down arrows. That is the wrong side of the cost curve. We need to kill the archer. It's far, far cheaper to kill the archer than it is to shoot down the arrows. Once again, this would take a policy change. We have for years discouraged Ukraine from firing back into Russia, but we have enabled or allowed Russia to fire tens of thousands of missiles into drones and missiles into Ukraine. We need to change that paradigm.
Thank you, sir. There's so many things to cover, and one thing that I really know that you're passionate about, which is related but not directly to the Ukraine, specifically to the Ukraine situation. It's about gray zone aggression and what some people loosely call hybrid warfare. Russia has been extremely creative in using means below the threshold of armed combat to achieve its strategic objectives. How do you think the West should respond to Russia's gray zone aggression, such as information warfare, assassinations, sabotage, etc.?
Well, in the words of a great former Secretary of Defense who was also a Marine general, we need to take the field. Frankly, we are not fighting in this space. I tell people all the time, we are at war. Clausewitz, Sun Tzu, Jomini, they all said it in their own language. The enemy gets a vote. And Russia is fighting us today. They are at war with us. We can sit back and deny that war, but the enemy gets a vote. And right now, we are not taking the field. We are not returning fire. Mr. Putin acts with nearly complete freedom below the line of kinetics. He's been operating in every election we've had in the last 3 or 4. He's operating in the elections of other countries. He's sabotaging all across the world. People say, well, he's never sabotaged America. Oh, yes, he has. For those of us who live in America, remember the southeastern gas line attack where the Russians shut off a major transfusion point in the southeast of America and gas prices doubled in 2 days. So, Mr. Putin is carrying on his war below the line all around the world, and nobody's returning fire. My famous quote is that this is sort of like Roger Federer going to the French Open and saying, I'll receive serve for the whole tournament. That's what we're doing out there right now. We're receiving serve. We do defensive things, but we haven't taken the field to fight Mr. Putin below the lines. Again, this is a matter of policy, will, determination, moral courage. We have to take the field and begin to return fire. Fighter pilots are famous for saying that the best defense is your missile in the air going at your enemy. Shorten it, the best defense is an offense. And so we have yet to take the field.
Assuming that there were a change in at the policy level, what kind of countermeasures in the gray zone can you imagine the West taking against Russia?
Well, I think we have all the tools. It's a matter of where and how you use them. I mean, we need to be intellectually honest. The West has a lot more to lose, especially in cyber, than other nations do. We in the West, for economic reasons and others, we depend on the internet and capability to use the internet in a way that few nations do. And so we do have great risk. But if we continually sit back and say, not taking the risk, receive serve, not taking the risk, receive serve, not taking the risk, receive serve, we can back up until our heels are on our own shore. And so this is a matter, once again, of moral courage and being able to determine how are we going to increase the cost on Mr. Putin. Why would he change anything he's doing? It's not costing him anything in the big scheme of things right now to attack the West below the lines of kinetic activity. He gets away with it. Why would he ever think about quitting?
Are there specific activities that you can imagine the United States or the West taking to see?
Right now, if we were to use the simple laws of the sea and our ability to control the national water spaces, we could nearly shut down the shadow fleet. Again, the numbers rise almost by day. The last time I heard a definitive number, it was like 142 ships are now sailing around the world hauling Russian oil and keeping the Russian economy afloat. And if we simply use the tools that we have available to us and shut that fleet down, it would have a massive impact. There are other things we could do, but that's the first and most demonstrative I could think of.
That would be a pretty dramatic step, and but with obvious potential effect. Let me just shift for a final question. We're running out of time, but a final question, kind of shifting the geographic scope. Uh, do you think NATO has a role in the Indo-Pacific region? And if so, what is that role?
Well, let me first answer, does NATO have an interest in the Indo-Pacific region? And I'll tell this story quickly. I think it was my fourth day on the job as a SACURA package came across my desk, sort of tacitly approving or the plan for 7 NATO ships to go be involved in RIMPAC. If you're not familiar with the RIMPAC, Rim of the Pacific is the biggest naval exercise. It's almost like Reforger was in Europe in the day. And come to find out that we have always had a pretty large number, and that number is growing every year now, of NATO navies who want to go and be in that exercise because they have their own national interests to make sure for the free passages of goods and trade in the Indo-Pacific. So NATO has been interested in the Indo-Pacific for a long time. It's not new. Our interest is growing because we are very dependent on that trade and we need those routes open, and China is building the ability to close and control those routes. And so NATO's interest continues to grow. I think that exercising with, being interoperable with, understanding tactics, techniques, and procedures in the air and on the sea, and to a certain degree on the land, but it's more about the air and the sea in the Pacific. These are all important things that NATO needs to be focused on, and in a pretty large way, they already are.
A senior American defense official recently said that we don't want you there in terms of NATO in the Indo-Pacific region. Do you think that that's a mistaken point of view on the part of the United States?
Send me an email afterwards of who that senior individual was. I'm not aware of this statement. I think that's another indication of exactly sort of the limited experience level of some of the people that are in our government at this time.
I'll leave it at that. General, it's getting close to the hour. I want to thank you for your generosity with your time. Any final comment to us before we sign off?
Well, first and foremost, this is a group primarily of Europeans, as I can see it, or Eastern Europeans, as I look at the list. And I would just encourage you to remain focused. Uh, um, there are a lot of perturbations in how the West cooperates with itself, and we are certainly in a time now where there have been some challenges, but there are indications that our senior most leadership is beginning to understand who Russia really is. And I would just encourage those who are listening that we will get this right. I remind, and the French sometimes get angry at me when I remind, NATO has had challenges. We got thrown out of a capital once, if you remember.
Mhm.
And so NATO has had bigger challenges than this, and we survived it and are in great shape. And we will survive the challenges of today And as I have said, I think NATO is more important in the next 75 years than it has been in the last.
I think that that's a poignant statement to end this discussion with. General Breedlove, thank you so much for your time, your generosity, and your leadership, your thought leadership. And as I mentioned at the outset, the Center for the Study of Democracy is dedicated to building bridges between thought leaders in the policymaking, scholarly, and practitioner communities, and you represent all of those now. Thank you very much. And let's please stay in touch. To the Center for the Study of Democracy team, thank you for your support and interest. And to everybody else, thank you for joining us. Please stay strong, stay safe, and stay in touch. And without further ado, Michael McCloudzik is signing off from Washington, D.C. Thank you all, and have a good day.
Goodbye.
Take care, sir.